Presiding Officer. In recent weeks, we've witnessed a sickening outbreak of gangland violence across the country. 2 Scottish drug dealers have now been shot dead in Spain. Their gang has waged a turf war on Scotland's streets since the dawn of devolution, and this has mutated to include proxy groups, including the US-sanctioned Kinahan cartel. These parasites grow rich by preying on society's most vulnerable. These cowards cause terror and death with guns, knives and firebombs. These thugs go after journalists, politicians, businessmen, police and prison officers. Organised crime is out of control and communities are living in fear. Does John Swinney accept that the Scottish Parliament has failed to tackle organised crime in Scotland?
First Minister.
There was an awful lot in what Mr Findlay said originally, with which I agreed, because organised crime is intolerable, it is unacceptable, it requires the forensic attention of our police and criminal justice authorities to tackle it, and that is being undertaken within Scotland on a relentless basis by Police Scotland and by the criminal justice authorities. I would expect the authorities to pursue that level of scrutiny and activity, and that is what is happening. So I don't agree with Mr Findlay's conclusion that he ended his question upon.
Russell Findlay.
Well, John Swinney says he agrees about the seriousness of organised crime. Under successive SNP and Labour governments, organised crime is rarely on the agenda. It wasn't even mentioned in this government's flagship 5-year justice strategy, not even once. And I get into politics because I couldn't understand why politicians don't talk about its malevolent reach and devastating harm. Local frontline policing is absolutely critical. And the Scottish Police Federation has said, and I quote, "The bottom line is the intelligence in organised crime groups and terrorism comes from the communities. If you don't have community police officers out there patrolling and picking up on that intelligence, then they are missing out on so much." And under the SNP, however, officer numbers have fallen by nearly 1,000. So does John Swinney accept the view of frontline officers that his government's decision to reduce police numbers inevitably fuels organised crime?
First Minister.
There are quite a number of flaws in the argument that has been put forward by Russell Findlay. The first flaw is that there are a very high number of participants in organised crime activity who are currently incarcerated for a very long time in the jails of Scotland, contributing to the significant congestion that is in our prison system just now. And one of the operational challenges for the Scottish Prison Service, which is why I admire their work so strongly, is that they are having to ensure that our prisons remain safe internally because of the number of members of organised crime groups who are housed in our prisons, because they cannot be housed together for the danger of internal stability to our prisons. And that's the type of focused work that the Scottish Prison Service is taking forward. The second flaw in Mr Findlay's argument is that this government established the Scottish Crime Campus, which is viewed across the world as one of the most innovative and successful measures of bringing together all of the intelligence gathering, whether it's Police Scotland or the National Crime Agency or the enforcement authorities of the United Kingdom, in one place. Indeed, it is visited by people around the world because of its leading nature. And the third thing, Mr Findlay said we never talk about these things. Well, 3 times a year, the Serious Organised Crime Task Force is brought together within the government, involving local authorities, the NHS, Police Scotland, the National Crime Agency, His Majesty's Revenue and Customs and various other organisations, to make sure that we tackle this issue. And indeed, the Serious Organised Crime Strategy was published in February 2022, updating the actions that we are taking as a government.
Russell Findlay.
The First Minister talks about the prisons being safe. Well, tell that to the 10 prison officers whose cars have been firebombed outside Scotland's prisons by organised crime gangs fighting for control of the drugs trade inside Scotland's prisons. There's a dangerous complacency to this government's approach. And we also need to stop the crime bosses from exploiting vulnerable young people. The 2 men shot dead in Spain were groomed for a life of crime. Most of their gang associates are dead or in prison. And now there's an official policy in place that makes young people even more vulnerable to exploitation. Senior Police Scotland officers say that under-25 sentencing guidelines are part of the problem. Detective Superintendent Andy Patrick said, quoting, "Organised crime groups are exploiting this policy. They are coercing young and vulnerable people to carry out some of these crimes because they are under reduced risk of imprisonment." Will John Swinney rethink his government's support of these damaging guidelines?
First Minister.
Not for the first time, Presiding Officer, I cannot allow Mr Findlay's remarks to stand about the under-25 sentencing guidelines. It is misleading to say to members of the public that there are no consequences for criminal activity under the age of 25, because there are. There are very serious consequences which involve imprisonment. So we cannot have messages being issued from this Parliament which indicate that there are no consequences for serious criminal activity, because there are, no matter the age of the individual involved. So we just cannot have this as a Parliament where we do not properly represent what the law and the sentencing guidelines take, because people could take the wrong conclusions from that. Now, Mr Findlay's made a number of remarks about the shootings that took place in Spain in recent days. These are live police investigations, so I am not able to comment on these particular issues. They have been pursued by the Spanish authorities. But what I do say to Parliament is that any individual involved in criminal activity, no matter their age, must be aware of the severity of the punishments that exist, and that's the right position for people to hear from this Parliament.
Russell Findlay.
Presiding Officer, John Swinney appears to be hearing things. I said no such thing. We've got top-level crime bosses making millions of pounds from killing vulnerable Scots with their drugs. We were told that the Mr Biggs would be bankrupted by a proceeds of crime law that was passed at the start of devolution. But the law has failed. Criminals and their white-collar enablers no longer fear proceeds of crime. And 18 months ago, the SNP rejected my call to review why it's not working. According to the Crown Office, one drug dealer made more than £126 million, but they can only find £118,000 worth of his assets. Proceeds of crime needs an urgent and radical overhaul. We must turn the tables on the drugs gangs so that they live in fear. So will John Swinney toughen this legislation to make it fit to tackle organised crime in 2025 and beyond?
First Minister.
Well, I'm open to making sure we've got the correct legislative framework in place to deal with criminality in our country. That's why the government brings forward legislation. So Mr Findlay is making suggestions about an area of policy that could be considered for strengthening. I am perfectly willing to consider that, because I don't want anybody to benefit from criminal activity in our society, and I want people to be punished accordingly. So the government will always keep legislation under review, but it has to be acknowledged that we have, and our criminal justice authorities, the police and the Crown, have been successful in apprehending, imprisoning, interrupting, disrupting organised crime in this country, and I give the public the assurance that under my government's leadership that will be sustained in the years to come.